What if I told you that money has already tried to reach you, but you didn't recognize it? Not because you're not capable, not because you don't deserve it, but because the way you've been taught to look at money is making you miss it in real time. Most people hear about manifestation, the law of attraction, attracting wealth, financial freedom, and they imagine something distant, something that takes time, something that requires endless effort, repetition, and patience. But deep down, there's a question that never goes away. If it's real, why hasn't it happened yet? And that question creates something dangerous. Doubt, not loud, obvious doubt, but subtle doubt. The kind that hides behind logic, behind being realistic, behind waiting for proof before believing. So you try again, you repeat affirmations, you visualize abundance, you think about money more often. And for a moment, it feels like something is shifting. But then, nothing, or worse, small signs appear and then disappear just as fast. And that's where frustration begins to grow. Because now it's not just about money anymore. It's about control, about feeling like something is almost working, but never fully arrives, and without realizing it, you enter a cycle trying, waiting, checking, doubting, restarting. Over and over again. But what if the problem isn't that money isn't coming? What if the problem is that you've been trained to expect it in a way that makes it invisible when it does? Because here's something most people never stop to question. Why does it feel like money appears out of nowhere for some people, while for others, it feels slow, forced, and out of reach? Is it luck? Is it timing? Or is there something happening beneath the surface? Something that changes the way reality responds to you? This is where things start to get uncomfortable, because the answer has nothing to do with external circumstances. It has everything to do with your internal state, the way you think about money. The way you react to opportunities, the way you interpret what's happening around you. Because manifestation isn't just about attracting something new, it's about becoming aware of what's already trying to align with you, and when that awareness is off, even slightly, you can be surrounded by opportunities and still feel stuck, still feel like nothing is happening, still feel like you're waiting. And this is exactly why the idea of money appearing out of nowhere feels so mysterious, because when it finally happens, it looks instant, but the process that created it was already unfolding long before you noticed. Which means, if you could understand that process, if you could recognize the exact moment where things begin to shift, you wouldn't have to wait for money anymore. You would start noticing it forming, approaching, responding. But to see that, you need to look at this from a completely different angle, one that most people ignore without even realizing it. And once you see it, you'll understand why it was never really about making money appear. It was about why you couldn't see it when it already started moving toward you. And if this is starting to make you question everything you thought you knew about money, manifestation, and the law of attraction, that's a good sign, because most people never even reach this point of awareness. They stay stuck in the same loop, repeating the same patterns, waiting for something external to finally change, without realizing that the shift they're looking for has to happen first on the inside. So before we go deeper into this, take a second and just notice how this feels. Have you ever had a moment where something almost happened, where it felt like money was about to come, and then suddenly it didn't? If you felt that, comment below. I've felt this before, not just as a comment, but as a way to acknowledge that you're becoming aware of a pattern most people ignore their entire lives. And if you're starting to see things differently already, if something here is resonating with you in a way you can't fully explain yet, take a moment to like this video. Because when you engage with this message, you're not just supporting the channel, you're reinforcing this shift in your own mind. You're telling yourself, this matters, I'm paying attention now. And if you want to go deeper into this kind of understanding, if you want to learn how to actually align with money, wealth, and abundance in a way that feels natural instead of forced, make sure you subscribe, because what we're about to get into next is where things start to change in a very real way. This is where we break the biggest illusion about money appearing out of nowhere. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. So let's break this illusion right now. Because the idea that money appears out of nowhere is one of the most misunderstood concepts in manifestation. And the reason it feels so real is because when it finally happens, you don't see the steps that led to it, you only see the result. Someone receives an unexpected payment, a new opportunity shows up suddenly, a deal closes faster than expected, and from the outside, it looks instant, like it came out of nothing. But what you didn't see is that something had already started shifting long before that moment, because money doesn't respond to random events. It responds to alignment, to your internal state, to the way you think, feel, and expect. And here's where it gets interesting, because that alignment doesn't always look obvious at first. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like a big breakthrough most of the time. It starts quietly. In the way you interpret something. In the way you react to a situation. In the way you think about money when no one is watching. Small shifts, subtle changes, but those small shifts begin to reorganize everything. Your perception sharpens. Your decisions change. Your energy becomes different, and suddenly things that were always around you start to stand out. An idea that you would have ignored before now feels relevant. A conversation that seemed random now feels like an opportunity. A chance that you might have hesitated on now feels natural to take. And this is the part most people miss. They think the money came from that moment. From that opportunity, from that situation. But in reality, that moment was just the result of a shift that had already happened inside you. That's why it feels like out of nowhere, because the internal process is invisible. You don't see your own alignment forming in real time. You don't notice the exact moment your mindset starts to change. You don't realize when your relationship with money becomes less resistant, more open, more receptive. But that's where everything begins. Not in the external event, but in the internal adjustment. And the moment that adjustment stabilizes, reality starts to respond quietly at first, then more clearly, until eventually something happens that feels sudden. But it wasn't sudden. It was built layer by layer, thought by thought, reaction by reaction. And this is why chasing fast money without understanding this process leads to frustration, because you're trying to force the final result without allowing the internal shift that creates it. You're focusing on the appearance instead of the mechanism, and the mechanism is always the same. State first, then response, never the other way around. But here's the part that changes everything. If money appears to come out of nowhere only after alignment is reached, then technically, the moment you enter that aligned state, the process has already started, even if you can't see it yet, even if there's no immediate proof, even if nothing looks different on the surface, something is already moving. And this is where most people break the process, because they look around, don't see instant results, and assume nothing is happening. So they go back to doubt, back to checking, back to forcing. And in doing that, they interrupt the alignment that was just beginning to form. They stop the process before it becomes visible. And then they say, it didn't work, but it was working. They just didn't stay long enough to let it unfold. And once you truly understand this, you stop obsessing over when money will show up. You stop chasing signs. You stop trying to force results, because you realize that what matters isn't the moment money appears. It's the moment your state changes. That's the real starting point. That's when everything begins. And once that clicks, something shifts in the way you approach manifestation. You become less reactive, more aware, more intentional. You start noticing patterns you didn't see before. You begin to understand why certain moments in your life felt like breakthroughs, while others felt stuck. Because now you can see the difference between action without alignment and alignment that creates action naturally. And this is where things start to feel different. Not because money has already appeared, but because you can feel that something is building. Something is organizing beneath the surface. Something is starting to respond to you in a way that didn't happen before. And the more you stay with that, the more consistent it becomes. If this is making you realize that money never really comes from nowhere, that it's always responding to something deeper, you can comment something like it starts within, just to anchor that awareness, because what you're about to see next goes even deeper into why most people block this process right when it's about to work. And once you truly understand that nothing comes from nowhere, that everything begins with alignment, there's something else you start to notice, something a little uncomfortable but extremely powerful. Once you see it, you've been blocking the process at the exact moment it starts working, not intentionally, not consciously, but consistently, because right after that internal shift begins, right after your state starts to change, your mind does something almost automatic. It goes back to checking reality. You look at your bank account. You think about your current situation. You remember what hasn't worked before, and in that moment, even if it's subtle, something contracts inside you. That openness you just created starts to close. That sense of possibility gets replaced by evaluation. And this is where manifestation gets interrupted, because the law of attraction doesn't just respond to your intention, it responds to your dominant state. So even if you aligned for a few minutes, if you return to doubt, scarcity, or the need for proof, that becomes the signal again, and the process resets. This is why so many people feel like they're almost there all the time. They touch the right state briefly. They feel it. They even believe it for a moment, but then something pulls them back, a thought, a memory, a habit, and suddenly they're back in the same emotional pattern, back in waiting, back in trying. Back in needing something to change. change before they believe, and this is where the real block exists. Not in your ability to manifest, not in your worthiness, but in your consistency, because manifestation isn't about reaching the right state once, it's about not leaving it, and most people don't realize how quickly they leave. It happens in seconds, a single thought like, what if it doesn't work? This is taking too long. I've tried this before. And just like that, the energy shifts, the alignment breaks, the process pauses. And from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening, but something was happening. It just didn't have time to fully materialize, and this is why the idea of money appearing fast feels inconsistent for most people, because their state is inconsistent. They align, then disconnect, they believe, then question. They open, then close, over and over again, and every time they close, they reinforce the same reality they're trying to change. So instead of allowing the process to build momentum, they keep restarting it, and that creates the illusion that manifestation is slow or unreliable, but it's not. It's just being interrupted, and the hardest part to accept is that this interruption feels normal. It feels like thinking, it feels like being realistic, it feels like checking if it's working, but in reality, it's resistance, subtle, automatic, but powerful enough to stop everything. So the real shift begins when you stop identifying with those thoughts. When you stop following every doubt that appears, when you realize that not every thought deserves your attention, especially the ones that pull you back into the same old state, because you don't need to eliminate doubt completely, you just need to stop returning to it. And that changes everything, because now, even when the old patterns try to come back, you don't fully engage, you notice them, but you don't go deeper. You feel the urge to check, but you pause. You sense the doubt, but you don't build on it. And that pause, that small moment of awareness, is what keeps the alignment alive. It's what allows the process to continue instead of restarting again. And the more you practice that, the easier it becomes, the more natural it feels to stay in the state that actually attracts money. Not forced, not exaggerated. Just stable. And when your state becomes stable, your results start to reflect that stability. Because now, you're no longer sending mixed signals, you're no longer switching between scarcity and abundance, you're consistent, and consistency is what turns alignment into reality. It's what allows things to move from internal to external. From invisible to visible. And this is where the shift begins to feel real, not because something dramatic has happened yet, but because you're no longer interrupting the process every few minutes, you're allowing it to unfold, and that alone changes the timeline completely, because now, instead of constantly resetting your manifestation, you're finally letting it build. And once something starts building without interruption, it reaches a point where it becomes impossible not to notice. If this made you realize how often you've been breaking your own alignment without noticing, you can comment something like, I stay aligned just to anchor that shift, because what comes next is where we move from awareness into a simple method that makes this process feel natural instead of forced. And now that you can see how the process begins and how it gets interrupted, this is where everything starts to come together in a way that actually feels usable, real, something you can apply immediately without overthinking it. Because the truth is, manifestation doesn't fail because it's complicated. It fails because people try to control it instead of stabilizing it. They try to force results instead of holding the state that naturally produces those results. So instead of giving you something complex, what actually works is something almost as simple, but only if you understand how to use it the right way. It's not about repeating endless affirmations. It's not about visualizing for hours. It's about introducing a clear internal command and then allowing it to reshape your state in real time, not as a hope, but as a decision, because your mind responds differently when something feels optional versus when it feels defined. And most people approach manifestation like a suggestion. I hope this works. Maybe this will happen. I'll try to feel abundant. That uncertainty weakens everything. But when you shift into a command, something changes instantly. Your mind stops negotiating. It starts organizing. And this is where the method begins. Instead of trying to attract money, you interrupt your current state and replace it with a precise declaration. Asterisk something like, asterisk money is available to me now, asterisk simple. Asterisk direct. Asterisk but powerful for one one reason. Asterisk it removes distance. Asterisk it doesn't say money is coming. Asterisk it doesn't say money will arrive someday. Asterisk it places money in your present reality. Asterisk and your brain, your perception, your emotional state all begin adjusting to that assumption. Asterisk not perfectly at first. Asterisk but enough to create a shift. Asterisk and that shift is all you need to start the process. Asterisk because the goal isn't to feel 100% convinced instantly. Asterisk the goal is to move from resistance into openness. Asterisk from tension into neutrality. Asterisk from I don't have into it's possible right now. Asterisk and once that door opens, even slightly, things begin to move. Asterisk but here's the part most people miss. Asterisk they say the command, feel a small shift, and then stop. Asterisk or worse, they say it once and immediately go back to checking reality. Asterisk and that breaks everything. Asterisk because the power isn't in saying the command. Asterisk it's in what happens after. Asterisk it's in how you carry that state into the next moment. Asterisk into your next thought. Asterisk into your next reaction. Asterisk because if you say money is available to me now, but then immediately think about lack, bills, delay, doubt. Asterisk you've replaced the new state with the old one. Asterisk and the mind always follows the strongest signal. Asterisk so the real method isn't repetition. Asterisk it's continuity. Asterisk you say the command and then you stay with it. Asterisk not by forcing belief. Asterisk but by not abandoning it. Asterisk you move through your day with that subtle assumption in the background. Asterisk you don't argue with it. Asterisk you don't try to prove it. Asterisk you just let it exist quietly, consistently. Asterisk and something interesting begins to happen. Asterisk your reactions start to change. Asterisk situations that used to trigger stress feel lighter. Asterisk opportunities that you would have ignored feel more visible. Asterisk ideas come with less resistance. Asterisk actions feel more natural. Asterisk and this is where the external world begins to respond. Asterisk not because you forced it. Asterisk but because your internal state is no longer blocking it. Asterisk and when that blockage is removed, even partially, things can move quickly. Asterisk sometimes faster than you expect. Asterisk because the path was already there. You just couldn't see it before. Asterisk and now, without forcing, without chasing, you're starting to align with it. Asterisk and that alignment creates movement. Asterisk momentum. Asterisk flow. Asterisk but only if you don't interrupt it again in the same way as before. Asterisk if this made you realize that manifestation isn't about doing more, but about staying in the right state. You can comment something like I hold the state just to anchor that shift, because what we're about to step into next is the one behavior that silently cancels this entire method, even when everything was starting to work. Asterisk and this is the point where everything you've learned either starts working for you or quietly falls apart again without you even realizing why. Asterisk because even after understanding the method, even after feeling that shift, even after starting to hold the state, there's one pattern that keeps pulling people back into the same cycle. Asterisk and it's subtle. Asterisk it doesn't look like resistance at first. Asterisk it feels like awareness. Asterisk like responsibility. Asterisk like you're just checking in to see if things are changing. Asterisk but what's really happening is that you're stepping out of the state and back into observation. Asterisk you stop being the version of you who has access and become the version of you who is waiting to see if access is real. Asterisk and that shift, even if it lasts just a few seconds, is enough to break the continuity. Asterisk because manifestation doesn't respond to moments. Asterisk it responds to identity. Asterisk to the version of you that is most consistent. Asterisk so if part of you is aligned, but another part keeps going back to doubt, checking, and analyzing, the signal becomes unstable. Asterisk mixed. Asterisk and when the signal is mixed, the results slow down. Asterisk not because something external is blocking you. Asterisk but because internally, you're switching states too often. Asterisk and this is why the behavior of checking is so powerful. Asterisk because it feels harmless. Asterisk you look at your reality. Asterisk you think, has anything changed? Asterisk you scan for proof. Asterisk and when you don't see immediate evidence, something tightens inside you. Asterisk a small contraction. Asterisk a quiet thought. Asterisk maybe it's not working yet. Asterisk and in that moment, you've already left the state. Asterisk you've replaced certainty with evaluation. Asterisk you've replaced alignment with doubt. Asterisk and the process pauses again. Asterisk this is the silent reset that most people never notice. Asterisk they think manifestation takes time. Asterisk but in reality, they're restarting it over and over again without realizing it. Asterisk asterisk because every time you check from a place of needing proof, you reinforce the idea that it's not here yet, asterisk, and that becomes your dominant state. Again, asterisk, so the key isn't to eliminate thoughts, asterisk, it's to stop following the ones that pull you out, asterisk, to recognize the exact moment where you're about to check and choose differently, asterisk, not by force, asterisk, not by pretending, asterisk, but by remembering what state you decided to hold, asterisk. Money is available to me now, asterisk, not as words, but as identity, asterisk, so instead of checking, you return, asterisk, back to that assumption, asterisk, back to that internal position, asterisk, back to that quiet certainty that something is already unfolding, even if you can't see it yet, asterisk, and the more you do that, the more stable it becomes, asterisk, because now you're no longer reacting to reality, asterisk, you're allowing reality to reorganize around your state, asterisk, and that's when things begin to feel different in a way that's hard to explain, but impossible to ignore, asterisk, you feel less urgency, asterisk, less pressure, asterisk, less need to control the outcome, asterisk, and at the same time, more openness, asterisk, more clarity, asterisk, more subtle signs that something is shifting, asterisk, and this is where money starts to appear, asterisk, not as magic, asterisk, not as luck, asterisk, but as a natural response to a state that is no longer blocking it. An opportunity shows up, a connection happens, asterisk, an idea turns into something real, asterisk, and from the outside, it looks sudden, asterisk, like it came from nowhere, asterisk, but you know better now, asterisk, you know that it started the moment you stopped interrupting the process, the moment you stopped checking, asterisk, the moment you stayed, asterisk, and once you experience that, even once, everything changes, asterisk, because now you have reference, asterisk, now you've seen what happens when alignment is sustained, asterisk, and that makes it easier to trust the next time, asterisk, to hold the state longer, asterisk, to resist the urge to go back, asterisk, because you've felt the difference, asterisk, and that's what turns this from something you try into something you live, asterisk, not perfectly, asterisk, but consistently enough to create movement, asterisk, and when that movement starts, it builds, asterisk, faster than before, asterisk, stronger than before, asterisk, more naturally than before, asterisk, but only if you don't fall back into that same automatic habit of stepping out right when things are starting to align, asterisk, if this made you realize how often you've been checking and breaking your own manifestation without noticing, you can comment something like, I don't check, I trust, just to anchor that shift, because the next step is where you turn this awareness into something you repeat daily, without effort, without resistance, almost automatically, asterisk, and if you made it this far, if you stayed through every part of this message, then you already know this wasn't just another video, asterisk, something clicked, asterisk, maybe subtly, maybe deeply, but something in the way you see money, manifestation, and your own power has already started to shift, asterisk, and that matters more than you think, asterisk, because most people never stay long enough to reach this point. They jump from video to video, searching, trying, doubting, but never allowing something to truly land, asterisk, you did, asterisk, so if you felt this, even a little, go down to the comments right now and type, I don't check, I trust, asterisk, not just as words, but as a decision, a shift in identity, a moment where you stop interrupting your own flow and start allowing things to move, asterisk, and if you want to keep building this state, if you want to train your mind to naturally attract money, wealth, and abundance without falling back into old patterns, make sure you subscribe to the channel, asterisk, because this isn't about one video, it's about repetition, immersion, and becoming the version of you that no longer blocks what's already trying to reach you, asterisk. Also, take a second to like this video, asterisk, not just to support the content, but to reinforce this shift inside your own mind. When you engage with this message, you're telling yourself that this awareness matters, that you're ready to think differently, to operate differently, asterisk, and right now, there's a video on your screen, asterisk, that's your next step, asterisk, because what you've just unlocked only gets stronger if you keep going, if you stay in this state a little longer, if you continue feeding your mind with the right signals, asterisk, so don't break it now, asterisk, click on the next video and keep moving forward.